Good afternoon. My name is Sheldon Schuster, and I serve as president of Keck Graduate Institute. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Dan Witzling, who is the Executive Director, Los Angeles Central Coast Area for the American Cancer Society, or ACS. He is primarily responsible for managing the Society's broad event portfolio, creating and developing regional and internal boards, and establishing innovative collaborations to support and advance cancer care. Before the ACS, Dan was a Director of Corporate Development and Marketing for a nonprofit called Breathe California of Los Angeles, which merged with the American Lung Association. Prior to that, he served as Director of Communications for Jewish Big Brothers and Sisters of Los Angeles. Dan earned his BA at UCLA in International Business Development Studies and Developmental Economics. He received his MBA from American Jewish University. Thanks for joining me, Dan. It's a pleasure to have you here. And before I begin, I would like to say, as I mentioned, we had our little party and celebration a few minutes ago, that the ACS to me has a very special meaning in that it was the organization that took a chance on and funding a very young investigator many years ago, who was just starting research in cancer at the University of Nebraska. So my thanks to the ACS runs deep and broad, and I really appreciate all the things that you do as an organization. So today we had a special event where we got together to celebrate a big check signing for a student-led event that helped raise money for the American Cancer Society. Dan, could you talk a little bit about the ACS Research HERS event that took place in April at the Laverne Brewery and give folks some background?
Thank you. And I just wanted to say we appreciate the relationship and KGI and all of the students and the student clubs that have gotten involved, as well as the faculty. So American Cancer Society started a researchers campaign in 2018, small campaign out of the Midwest, with the idea that more than just focusing on what we were funding, we wanted to take a step back and look at who we were funding and were we reflecting the diversity and inclusion of the type of people that we really want to represent our cause and our mission, which is really part of our legacy to really reflect the communities that we're trying to serve. So in terms of research, we established the Research HERS, capital HERS campaign, which nationalized in 2019 to about a dozen communities around the country. So Los Angeles Central Coast being one of them. And this started really at the beginning of the year. And we were looking at how we wanted to create a Research HERS program that would really celebrate girls in STEM, women in science. We really wanted to emphasize the full spectrum of how we wanted women to be involved at all stages and to see this as a perfectly empowered path into any profession, as it relates to American Cancer Society and our mission. So the Researchers campaign started here, and with KGI, we were introduced through the KGI Consulting Club president, Aliyah Manetta, who, with some of the partners and people involved with the program, really brought together a strong coalition of the clubs at the campus to lead a program that really celebrates and reflects the diversity of this area. And today was kind of the culmination, and we are so appreciative of the students having raised more than $3,500 in a very short amount of time, including a celebratory event, which had a fundraising element at the Laverne Brewery that is owned by an alumni, I understand, from the KGI program, who's also involved who professionally with Gilead Kite, which is one of the pharma companies that we try to partner with to help us advance our mission. So it's a very cohesive and a natural partnership, and we appreciate it.
Dan, thank you for that background. Let me ask a little bit about the HERS program. What are the kinds of things you folks do to try to get more women and minorities engaged in cancer research? Give us any examples of that sort of thinking?
Well, we're a very data-driven organization. So when we have all forms of leadership, whether it's a board of directors, a community leadership council, or a group of people that are leading an event, or any one of the collective groups that we have kind of leading an initiative with American Cancer Society, we truly look at the community in which they're located, and we try to establish the leadership based on that. And more than that, we looked at the participant level of some of especially our larger events, where we want to make sure that the people that are attending a walk or a rally or whatever it is we're doing in a certain place are also reflective. So whether that's based on cultural demographics, gender demographics, age demographics, professionally, we really look to attack this and bring everybody together from every angle.
Thank you. That sort of really does, I think, resonate with our view as an institution. We really want to see more women and minorities involved in the whole life sciences endeavor. They are underrepresented, both women and minorities in the life sciences. Surprisingly, even though women actually make up the majority of our student body, actually, and the majority of students in life science PhD programs are female as well. And there's some really interesting barriers, and I'm really thrilled that the ACS is taking on one of them because, in fact, one of the barriers is getting money to start and do your research. So I think doing this is really going to have a lot of impact. So it's congratulations for this big effort. So let me ask you, you've got a lot of other partnerships with other organizations. What do those look like, and how do those kind of things work?
So we really will partner with an organization kind of based on some sort of point of synergy. So it could be based on looking at the workforce. So we'll partner with a gas company, for example, where they have a lot of employees that work in an outdoor area, and we'll present to them about sun safety, skin cancer prevention. We'll talk to them about lifestyle, nutrition, health, things that could be reflective in other places as well. But we really want to think about who is it that we're working with, and what is it that's important to them. We've partnered with government agencies that are interested in deeper engagement culturally. And what we do, because we really focus in communities in a very diverse, inclusive way, it makes it a very strong value added for a government agency to work with us in a public health initiative. We're actually championing with the Los Angeles area as well as nationally new public health initiatives. One that started a few years ago with colon cancer, what's called 80% in every community campaign, about getting 80% of the adult population screened early for colon cancer. And now the new HPV cancer-free campaign, where we say prevention, early detection, and vaccination is cancer prevention. And that's something that we as an organization were tasked with doing by the government. And that there's a reason why that we partner either on the private sector, the public sector, or even with community groups, is there's a high sense of trust in who we are and what we do. And we really pride ourselves in the authenticity of what we're doing in every community at a very low, minute level or very large level. And so that I think when you look at some of the different companies involved, it could be a pharma, it could be a bank, it could be a sports organization. We partnered with the NFL, we partnered with baseball. We just look at the people who are involved with them, whether it's the workforce or the consumers, and that's often why we partner. And then we'll find some common thread between us because we have every cancer amongst our initiative. And certainly, whether it's the children or the people involved or their parents, there's going to be a reason why somebody's going to want to partner with our organization. And once we find that, and we try to be very consumer focused in doing so, it creates something that's very sustainable with growth.
Thanks for that broad background. Let me ask you, I know you guys partner with a lot of athletic and sports organizations, and as a longtime baseball fan, I'm thrilled to see the decrease of all of those folks chewing tobacco on the baseball diamonds. That's before your time, but that's the way they used to play baseball all the time. But let me just ask you, I mean, one of the obviously still impactful negative things that we seem to be probably doing too much of, but certainly less than before, is smoking and those kinds of things. What are the kinds of things the ACS is doing to help out with smoking cessation? And my understanding that obviously the vaping is feeding into the discussion and making it more challenging as well. Any thoughts about that?
That's a great question, and I appreciate it. Certainly our war against tobacco is really part of our heritage as an organization, and it really took a shift a few years ago. And the evolution and the number of products that are in the market now versus where we would look even 20 years ago when it was more tobacco-driven products that were very brick and mortar, cigarettes, cigars, even hookah. that have long existed versus today products, which are electronic. We have a lot of different versions and names. So what are we doing about it? We're trying to norm the conversation, first of all, because in most cases, FDA has not approved most, if not all, these products that are being introduced into the U.S. to market, to know what chemicals are in there. Our position has always been that nicotine is carcinogenic in any matter, form, or substance. Fire is bad. So anything that's combustible is carcinogenic. And for better or for worse, that includes, some of the steaks that we cook on the barbecue in the summertime. So we're mindful of that. And so we've been heavily involved on an advocacy level. The interesting thing also about tobacco is you can make broad-based rules, but in terms of specific city rules, outdoor ordinances, it's not surprising, but I would say humbling to see how many cities don't yet have rules on even cigarettes in outdoor spaces, and how we sometimes are surprised coming from different parts of town with what we see when we go to other parts of town. Growing up, I never would have thought I would see the day that I would go to Las Vegas and have certain casinos that were smoke-free, and yet today there are. So a lot of what we're doing is kind of norming the fact that smoking any product is bad. Really looking at some of these new electronic products, often that are being invested in by tobacco companies under different names in different ways, really exposing them for what they are, and looking at the trends and the targets of who is, the fastest growing market for vaping products are middle school students. So why is this the case? And this is not just American Cancer Society, but a lot of organizations and individuals that are noticing this and being very active and firm on what is acceptable and what is not. We're doing the best we can, understanding also that there's products that are not necessarily to be vilified. There are real bona fide tobacco cessation products. There's nicotine gum and patches and things like that have gone through the process of getting FDA testing, that we're not going to ever vilify the user. And we're not going to just carte blanche vilify everything involved, because we know the addictive qualities. And so when we look at things like vaping and we look at the populations involved, we're changing our approaches, but we're very active on the political side and then in public awareness, and hopefully not just us, so that we normalize the conversation about vaping is electronic cigarettes, or whatever you want to call it, have some very, very harmful effects and risks, most of which we don't even know yet. And so we're trying to get people to recognize that and see them in the same camp as smoking tobacco products, until at least we have the time where some real research can show us otherwise. And that's where we are in time. So we don't want, and we see advertisements. You wouldn't see celebrities advertising for cigarette companies, or doctors advertising for cigarette companies, and yet they did in the 1950s. And here we are today with celebrities advertising for e-cigarettes and vaping on TV and radio. So we're trying to really shut down all of these access points, and how the next generation is being wooed. And then going back to diversity, where people are feeling very disproportionately targeted, like the LGBT communities that are telling us that we're trying to work to find the data. But regardless, there are certain communities that are feeling negatively targeted disproportionately by some of these companies, and we need to be right there with them.
I deeply appreciate how data-driven the ACS is, and how science-driven the whole organization has been from the earliest days of my long recollection and relationship with the organization. And I think that's really, really important. And certainly coming from a science-based institution such as KGI, it is important that we maintain that science. And I'm wondering, again, I want to push you a little bit on the policy kind of stuff. But we face a lot of things that we are really quite convinced do cause cancer, and we should prevent them. And certainly any tobacco product, as far as my understanding is, there is no safe level of a tobacco product. And I would totally support any kind of, certainly it's banned at this institution, anywhere on our premises, and I strongly support it. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is a lot of sort of popular stuff that is sort of non-scientific. And if you have sort of any kind of axe to grind, either with an organization or a chemical or whatever, you can start I don't know, rumor, I don't know if that's the right word, that it causes cancer. I mean, all the way from cell phones, windmills, I don't know, probably Slurpees or something. I have no idea. But even to the point now of what I think are very unscientific decisions made by juries, even here in California, about chemicals where there really is no data that they cause cancer. How do you sort through that, and how do you deal with the public part of this and the public understanding of this has to be extraordinarily complex to deal with?
It's an interesting question about what causes cancer, and it's also I see the parallel, the dangerous parallel about what could prevent cancer and all of the therapies that are being pushed in that direction as well. And in many ways, it's really the same. We're trying to be very cautious as an organization about what we will accept, who we bring to speak with authority with us in public settings. And we're very careful about, certain foods that, people claim have medicinal properties. We've had speakers just to kind of point out things, derivatives of certain types of mushrooms speaking at our events that we've had to kindly ask because we weren't expecting. But things happen all the time. And I think that what we try to do on one end is to make sure that people aren't focusing on any specific kind of silver bullet causes or silver bullet solutions. So, for example, when we think of lifestyle, yes, we know that there's a causal relationship with pollution. There's a causal relationship, a very high correlation we know with tobacco, to the point where we will say it's carcinogenic versus others that have potential for risk, but we try to do it in a well-balanced way so that people can live a life and not be, so confined that they don't really know how to have a normal life, or else they're going to kind of reject our whole philosophy. For example, understanding, with alcohol, are there levels that could be acceptable? There are. And so we look into that. Are there certain foods, understanding that are more carcinogenic or less? Yes. Smoked food, I mentioned barbecue, anything that has kind of that burnt quality, not so healthy, but at the same time, not necessarily going to be the tipping point. So we're trying to just encourage people to have more well-balanced, holistic approaches. And if there are specific things, we will be one of the first, and through a very rigorous process, to advocate on a policy level and on the street for prevention or any moratorium of any products that we know could have a direct, cancerous effect. If that's any best way to do this, I would just say that we're cautious, and we're never going to look to vilify an individual because we're trying to be reasonable. That we want more people to get engaged. We have more and more research, and I'll end on this note that prevention and early detection may be able to help a person either manage or avoid up to 50% of cancer risk, which is a huge number to say. And there's a lot of, is it 30%? Is it 40%? We're still figuring it out, but increasingly our data is showing us that go to your doctor, get checkups, could have a huge impact on avoiding cancer risk, regardless of the lifestyle. Not to say that you shouldn't be living gluttonous lifestyles, but at the same time, there are ways you can manage through and just kind of live a smart but reasonable life. We don't want people thinking that they need to live in a bubble. We just want to be very realistic. And I think that's to the credit of the people involved, really from every side of the aisle, politically or otherwise, that gets involved with the Cancer Society.
Yeah, I think all of us have been touched by cancer, but a relative or personally or somewhat. I don't think I know anyone who hasn't. So we're all. I hope I'm speaking for everyone is aware of the sort of the legacy things that you folks do and have done for so long, like the Strides and the Relay for Life that push cancer. What other things are you guys thinking about or doing, or what are your plans for the next few years?
Well, I think that our plans really for the next few years have kind of this similar thread. To an extent that we will continue convening, we will do so. We will have people at public, grassroots events. We will have kind of creative ways to shock and awe and get people to think about our cause. But in terms of a trend, what we're really looking to do, and being with KGI is a perfect example of that, is working with different partners through the lens of the partner to integrate some element of our mission into their day of life. So we're not going to necessarily be looking all the time for big companies to sponsor our this or that, students to show up at our walks. We might be at an institution, at a sporting event, at an Orange Theory Fitness, at a Barry's boot camp, talking in much of the same way, or justifying or really celebrating that somebody's doing something right, and getting the people involved to recognize that it doesn't, not just because it feels good, but because it has some very impactful long-term health benefit to what they're doing. The more we can be at an organization, especially when they have a large captive audience, looking at adults that are maybe in that sandwich generation, that taking care of their kids, taking care of maybe elder parents, but martyring themselves, maybe not taking care of themselves as much as they ought to, where they ought to start doing more of the checkups because they're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're really looking to adapt and evolve. We're certainly getting more active in social media space. Something that you may or may not notice. We don't advertise that much as an organization. You don't spend exorbitant amount of money on television, radio. If we're partnering in that way, it's typically aligned with whoever the partner is because we have something that they agree needs to be told. And there's a level of authenticity to all of this. So when we're partnering with different groups, looking either on a cultural level, partnering in San Gabriel Valley, where we're going to have a gala event, yes, but it's going to celebrate diversity in science. We have a Cal Spirit event that's going to bring together renowned chefs in the area to look at healthy food and lifestyle, so that people, if they're either coming to one of our events or we're going to integrate with some level of somebody at a university, a sporting, corporate, or public health, it will help to advance something, and in a way that helps people to connect the dots in a very normal way, and not compartmentalize. We're a charity. If I have extra time, then I'll get involved. If I have extra money, I'll support your cause. Or if I have a traumatic experience in my life, we really want to integrate ourselves into wellness, into lifestyle. And so there's a lot of different ways we're going to be looking to do that based on culture, based on geography, and otherwise.
Thanks for that. That helps a great deal. Let me just ask you about a couple of your new programs as well. The Gen to End campaign is one that I've recently heard about, and then the Bright Edge Ventures. Can you give us some background on those?
Yeah, happy to share. So Gen to End was created here as a name. We're proud to say Gen to End was created in the Los Angeles area, not Claremont, but Claremont adjacent. So in addition to the inspiring communities in the nearby area, we recognize that the need to involve young professionals in our cause historically, and this is true at least for the American Cancer Society. We've had very good influence and impact in the school setting, and we've had reasonable amount of influence and impact engaging adults, often once they're settled, building their families and otherwise, which leaves kind of a gap in between of about 20 to 25 years where people are, much as the KGI students. And when I pulled aside the graduating seniors to say, we're not just a charity, we're your partner. We're trying to engage people in a very important part of their life where we feel like we haven't fully penetrated. And so Gen to End is not just an age group, but it's a philosophy. And the philosophy also relates to your question about Bright Edge. We're at a stage where there's a tremendous amount that we know that we can impact prevention and less people having cancer, living long lives with cancer. And in fact, with the HPV vaccine as an example, there are now vaccines and early prevention tools, early detection tools, like any type of colon cancer screening that can have a 90% to 97% elimination rate of cancer. So this is we talk about a Gen to End. This is really the generation moving forward where we do want to see that we're either reducing the number of people that have cancer or absolutely reducing the mortality rate of people with cancer. Bright Edge is an exciting new investment opportunity that really dovetails how we got involved. So you mentioned yourself as a somebody early in their career, recently, of course, who was funded by American Cancer Society, and through that, it really helped to kind of establish, a pattern of growth, strong reputation, and acceptability, and really norms kind of a path in this field. Bright Edge is looking at some of the kind of later stage research that we're maybe working, or the researcher is working with a pharma company, or has something that could very viably go to market. It just needs a little bit more investment to get there. So what Bright Edge Ventures is American Cancer Society now looking to invest at late stage research to market. And beyond that, products to market will have their own stream because there's a cost involved with the treatments and the therapies, and the revenue that is generated through that is going to cycle right back into Bright Edge Ventures. So basically, we're just adding another way that we're going to bolster our ability to fund more research. We really set on a course 2 to 3 years ago where we wanted to double our research investment nationally. Coincidentally, Vice President Biden had the similar idea with the moonshot. We took that to heart. Similar ideas at the same time, but we are pushing forward with this, and this is our strategy to get there. And so, from a gen to end environment, we definitely see the KGI students that are moving into biotech fields could very much be a part of this through Bright Edge Ventures, where we're trying to really bolster what can be done so we can accelerate the products to market and really reduce the mortality rate a lot faster. We're trying to rapidly reduce mortality in the next 20 to 30 years. We've already reduced it right now with more than 60% living beyond the 5-year mark. And so we just have our foot on the gas. We see the opportunity, and we're really looking to advance towards cancer's endgame.
Several years ago, I remember reading a bunch of sort of not so enjoyable editorials saying, the war on cancer has been a failure. And I can't think of anything that's less true. It seems to me that the remarkable stuff that you folks are doing, the ACS is a major force in cancer research, obviously along with the NIH and some other incredible organizations. But pulling that whole gigantic train together, I think has had remarkable outcomes. I want to just end by asking you a little bit more about your concepts and what you're thinking about in terms of more of the equity kinds of issues, because I know the cancer rates in different populations are really quite different, and certainly the detection rates. And one of the things that we see, and I know we've done a lot of projects in some of our programs on, is actually getting minority communities involved in clinical trials. And it's a challenge for, a lot of people recognize that it's a real challenge. Any thoughts about how ACS is or can be or involved in that kind of effort to sort of level that playing field?
It's absolutely our interest to involve, especially where there's any disparities. So we have a recent example that speaks directly to this, and a philosophy kind of behind it. We're really looking at some of the cultural beliefs and barriers, why people aren't successfully having as much access to care, involvement in the continuum of care, or whatever it is. And we're trying to approach it with a high level of sensitivity, of bringing together kind of leaders representative of different populations in a room and asking the questions, and not looking to quickly get to the solutions, but to really unpack. So recently, going back actually a little bit over a year ago, one of our newer board members, we recruited from the Long Beach NAACP based on some disparities we saw, for example, with African-American women in breast cancer rates. We said, this isn't just a problem that we're going to reflect upon. This is a problem that we're going to partner with the right appropriate representative leadership to address as complete partners in the process. And so thanks to her, we brought together some thought leaders in the African-American community recently and had the discussion. And we really insisted that we are not here to solve. We are just here to understand. And we spent a lot of time looking into and trying to reveal what are perceptive barriers, what are experiences that are keeping people from getting the care they need, from not accessing the system, what are biases that they're experiencing, negative impacts or anything involved. And so this is something that we're continuing to do with all different types of communities where we see people not accessing care that we believe could be available to them. Or if it's not available, then understanding from not telling, but really understanding and asking, why is it that you're not getting or you can't, or what is it? What are your fears involved with cancer in general? And this is going to be true for indigenous populations. There's a high level of population from Asian American communities here in San Gabriel Valley. So understanding which cancers do they believe are their highest priorities. We have data. We have plenty of data, Lord knows. But really getting down to, it's not just us saying, here's your problem and here's how we recommend you fix it, but why aren't you? Or why did we think that you aren't, but really you couldn't? And using that to be our baseline for any solutions that are going to come forth. And that's really going to be the next wave of how we're going to get more people or encourage more people, because they're going to want to get involved with clinical trials. They're going to want, and we're going to work together to figure out why people can't have better access to fitness or nutrition or some of these fundamental rights that we believe that everybody has, and definitely have a correlation to cancer prevention or cancer risk.
Dan, I lied when I said that was the last question. Let me ask you one more, because this is absolutely fascinating to me, and I think a lot of folks will want your insight. You talk about, one of the things, and again, I don't expect ACS to solve this particular problem, but access in terms of cost has certainly become a current issue. Is ACS dealing with it, talking with constituents about it? How do you guys sort of think about that? Because it obviously is an issue for a whole lot of people.
Cost is something that we do our best. We have a cancer network that anybody can call, 800-227-2345, 24/7, and ask any question under the sun around cancer, including, I can't afford my treatment. I can't get to my treatment. Going back to some of these barriers, there are some insurance gaps that exist, which we find baffling, from a rational perspective, but there's, we're unpacking, years and years and years of policies and trying to figure out what might have thought to be sensible at a time that honestly isn't. The fact that you can go for a colon, get some sort of colon inspection, and that one might be covered by insurance. But if you find something, then if you go back the second time, then it isn't. There's a huge coverage gap. So we're actually working on legislation to kind of close some of these gaps. And to your point, we're trying to partner with as many, private, nonprofit or federal sources to figure out what is keeping people from getting the care that they need. And if it's financial, how do we work around that? There are a lot of companies that, could provide rebates. People don't always think of cancer as a disability. But disability is a trigger word for a lot of cost reductions, including really low cost bus rides or things like that. That having a cancer diagnosis gives you opportunities that you don't realize you have. So we're trying to be very creative. A policy level is where we're going to have the best impact. But from a right now level, we're trying to engage people as creatively as we can with as many partners and resources and networks as we can help them find, so they can get what they need as quickly as needed.
Well, Dan, as tempted as I am to keep asking you more questions, I want to respect your time. But on behalf of all of us, Dan, I want to thank you for your time and your insight, and for building this relationship with us. And we look forward to a lot more of these kind of discussions and interactions with you and the society. So thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Shannon Braun, and I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Partnerships at KGI. If your company is looking for an innovative outsourcing option, we'd like to highlight the Team Masters Project if you haven't already heard of it. The Team Masters Project, or TMP, is a capstone effort that brings value to companies and makes for a distinctive applied educational experience for our students. If you have more projects than people to manage them, delegate one of those to the KGI team. It'll allow you to focus on higher priorities and enhance your productivity. These projects have also been a great way for our sponsors to find a future employee or give a new manager some experience managing teams. We've done over 300 projects with some of the top companies in the life science industry and specialize in the areas of infrastructure and operations, technology landscaping, regulatory affairs, business development and strategy, as well as technical projects in bioprocessing and device engineering. Email me at sbraun@kgi.edu, that's SBRAUN @kgi.edu, or visit kgi.edu/TMP to learn more.